second edition of the Editors Live with your host, Ira Stoll, and our guest, the great Clarence Schwab, who I'm really excited to have here today. Clarence, um, welcome. I'm thrilled to have you here. And you've been you've been sort of a behind the scenes figure in this whole campus anti-Semitism crisis. Um, Maybe you could just tell us a little bit about who you are and how you got involved with this.
Sure. Thank you for inviting me, Ira. I guess why I focused on this is probably family. My father was is a Holocaust survivor um, of the camps. Came to the States in 47, and was basically smuggling guns to the Lachie in 47 and 48. And he started the National Committee on American Foreign Policy. He lived under both left and right totalitarianism. And the other influence in my life was my maternal grandfather. And he was a driving force behind any large-scale rescue effort of Jews toward the end of World War II related to Sweden, whether it's the Wallenberg mission or food packages to inmates in the camps, or the white buses to Sweden, or negotiations with Himmler not to blow up the camps at the end of the war. So that is part of what causes me to see things quickly, and what caused me to see on October 7th very surprising things.
So you have this family history. You're a Harvard Business School graduate, right?
Yeah,
And so um how do you get involved and what actually are you doing? I understand what you're the treasurer of
yeah.
the Harvard
Jewish
Jewish
Alumni
Alumni
Alliance.
Alliance,
Yeah,
and do you have some role also with the Harvard Jewish Business School group?
yeah. I started helped that too. So October 7th, I basically saw two things happen. One is letter signed by about 30 or 34 different Harvard student groups, and two is I saw the toolkit being downloadable, and I realized at that moment that actually this is a coordinated event with the Hamas and Iranian attacks on Israel, and that it was, to me, Jews were under attack. And so I tried to figure out where I could play, and I focused on campuses, and I focused on which campus, Harvard, because I had relations there. And if we can make a change at Harvard, then potentially that has impact at more places than just Harvard. So I tried to I worked very hard, and I focused specifically on trying to develop platforms that are credible at Harvard, at both the university-wide level with Harvard Jewish Alumni Alliance, and Eric invited me to join as the treasurer, and also at Harvard Business School for the first year, just to make sure that the messaging was the same at different levels of the university. And the reason for that was that Harvard is managed very decentrally. So to try to get something done at Harvard, you have to play at more than one level. And at the time, my thought was, let's play with the scope and bandwidth that I had, at the president and trustee level, and at the dean of business school level. So that was the initial. The focus was really, the objective I defined was to improve the safety and security of Jews on campus, specifically at Harvard at the time. And I was starting to think through points of influence and how to influence those points appropriately.
And has it gotten better since October 7th, 2023 at Harvard, or worse? And if it's improved, like how bad still is it? And how significant are the improvements? Or what, if there are the improvements, what are they? Or what are we still waiting on?
Very good questions. I think that some people don't notice something that I think is useful to point out. One is that Harvard agreed to settle with Biden's Department of Education Office of Civil Rights, a complaint that was brought to that office by Muslim and Arab students from Harvard related to their allegations of discrimination. The result, though, was very interesting, almost ironic. The analysis that the Office of Civil Rights did indicated that Harvard's policies related to discrimination and bullying, some of them were actually misapplying Title VI law, in essence, against it. And the practices employed undermined Harvard's own ability to satisfy those allegations. So, for example, if a student came, whether any student came with a problem and wanted to file a complaint, they weren't sure where to file it, or and there was no real response from the disciplinary unit. And for Title VI, you actually have to be prompt in your response to assess. More importantly, related to policy, they required students to divulge their own identity to their harassers. That's against Title VI. That's illegal. For Harvard to proceed to investigate the complaint at all, almost, in effect. And finally, the OCR found that Harvard wasn't keeping records. So what has occurred? So that's what was happening. Harvard has agreed to revise its policies and its practices in 120 days from January 17th. So by May, it has to actually deliver to the Office of Civil Rights updated policies and practices that show that they're in compliance with Title VI and transparent and responsive. So that's positive.
And that seems sort of abstract and bureaucratic, though. Like, does that really make a difference for students on campus in terms of, I feel like I'm constantly seeing a parade of hostile speakers, and when there's a pro-Israel speaker, they get protested.
So Harvard has to move faster than it's used to moving. You still have students being discriminated against and harassed who have approached me for assistance. You have, as you point out, like the Middle East Center inviting very problematic speakers. In fact, just yesterday, I think PCS invited to campus a very problematic speaker. And so Harvard has to move faster. It has to enforce its rules equally to all and promptly. And it hasn't started to do that as fast as it should.
And so,
there are some positives. So where are some positives? Okay. Two faculty members from RPL resigned. Okay.
What is RPL?
The Religion and Public Life at Divinity School.
And that was one of the problem areas.
Big areas. But okay, guess what? There are many centers that have problem faculty, not just RPL. So, for example, based on the report that Harvard Jewish alumni had put together in the spring of problem areas, you have the Center for Middle East Studies. You have FXB at Public Health, School of Public Health, each of which have problematic faculty in them. You have the Warren Charles Center. You have the Carr Center at Harvard Kennedy School. The Weatherford Center, the Weatherhead Center at Harvard. And in addition, you also have problematic faculty throughout different departments. So
what's your goal?
That is still in place. So have things changed? Yeah. Okay. So Harvard has, under duress, been forced to agree to certain agreements. Those agreements will be good once they actually implement them and eyes are on them. So it hasn't yet fully occurred, and that's why we're seeing these problematic things every single day. The second thing they did, which was a positive with regard to physical harassment slightly, was just before the beginning of the fall semester, the EVP of the university changed protocols with regard to HUPD so that they could intervene when they were seeing something problematic as opposed to just watch. Okay.
And HUPD, that's the police, the Harvard Police Department. Those are people, they actually have guns, I think. So,
right. So
they can arrest somebody.
Right. So, basic stuff like that, they changed just at the beginning of the fall semester. I think physical harassment based on the agreement, that fact, not only that fact, but also these two agreements that Harvard just agreed to settle, not just with the Department of Education Office of Civil Rights, but also with regard to student lawsuits, will move things forward and physical harassment will fall. But what still remains in place and is still in place is this indoctrination And so those people who were involved with harassment as well are still in place. In fact, for example, the professor related to the 3 students at Harvard Kennedy School who was found to have been harassing them um, is still in place. You still have all the DEI offices and the personnel in the DEI offices who literally perpetrated what the office, but Biden's Department of Education Office of Civil Rights analyzed, still in place. So I don't. You have faculty that are problematic that are still in place. You have staff, and you have very few consequences with regard to students, or some of whom are still in place. So I still think there's more to do.
And so, are you involved with Columbia too, and some other universities? Like, how many universities have you actually engaged with in your volunteer activist efforts, and are you seeing similar things in each place, or are there real differences, and what accounts for the variation? Why is Columbia worse than Harvard, better than Harvard? Are there places that are really outstanding and doing well on this, or is it pretty much kind of the same story everywhere?
Well, I generally interact with those where things are the worst, so I can't give you the full scope because
What
things.
are we saying? Dozens?
So
I
so
mean, at
so
least.
so so Tufts, MIT, Penn, University of Washington, Northwestern, Brown, Yale, Columbia come to mind. Berkeley. Uh,
As places where
that
you've
I've worked, that I've actually helped with alumni or students or some
that's
faculty.
a long list of colleges.
Yeah, and others. I mean, and in trying to serve them in their attempt to try to support students there, improve the safety and well-being of students and faculty there, and try to make a change, and how to interact with leadership at those institutions. Um, yeah, it's a so. Um, yes, some institutions are handling things better than others. I'm generally looking at those that are not handling it well. Yeah.
And are there similar problems, or there patterns that you're seeing?
So what I see as systematic, in my view, is the indoctrination across the board, like no change. No, I mean that is in certain of the social sciences and also in certain DEI departments. There is this development of a notion of oppressor oppressed, and de facto exclusion or reverse discrimination. Um, but the indoctrination comes from decade. This is Soviet propaganda that has developed and has been fused with other things. That is also related to Zionism and attacking Zionism. Literally the Soviet playbook. Literally the same words from 1960s. So it is now part of curricula, and it has been taught to students, and that genie is out of the bottle. So the question is, how do you start to solve that problem? And it's a systemic one. It's literally across campuses.
And Washington has gotten involved, and I know you've been involved also with the Washington side of this to a certain extent. Has this become a partisan issue? How and why? Why are Trump and the Republicans so worked up about this? Um, is that have a risk of backfiring, like we're seeing at Columbia, that there's an effort to rally around this guy with the pregnant wife? How do you view? I mean, it was a stunning thing, right? Like the president of Harvard, the president of Penn, and the president of Columbia all went down and testified before Chairman Fox's committee, and they all resigned.
Yeah.
So how do you see, and people see that as a danger, like, oh, it's the new McCarthyism of, the Washington involvement is going to ruin the universities. So is this involvement of Washington a healthy development? What's that all about?
Well, I think it's because, unfortunately, the leadership of these universities didn't lead. So, and there's no, and literally, look at Biden's Department of Education's Office of Civil Rights, having studied Harvard's own discrimination policies and practices and showing Harvard how delinquent Harvard is. And that was in addition to the evidence that Chairwoman Fox was able to extract from these universities. Literally, their own documents showed the extent to which they were not enforcing their own laws equally to all when Jews were targeted and Israelis were targeted. These are just evidence, it's facts, it's not ideology. And so the question is, why is it the case that these universities choose not to enforce their own rules, their existing rules? And that's a real problem. And that if it, I can tell you when we were speaking, I'm the chair of the Public Affairs Committee, also Harvard Jewish alumni, and our whole focus was working with Congress to say this is a bipartisan issue. This is Jews. Jews have civil rights like everybody else, are equal, and it's a bipartisan, deeply held American value that has been the case since the 60s. Civil rights. So at first, we were speaking, for example, very good Debbie Manning from North Carolina, and we were mentioning IHRA in terms of showing actually well-meaning people how anti-Semitism may manifest itself in different ways.
IHRA, that's a definition of anti-Semitism from the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance that
Right.
some people think is too expansive, but the mainstream Jewish community is pretty supportive of almost, and
Yeah.
even non-Jewish, like that's the State Department, the Department of Education. It's
40 other countries,
right,
international organizations,
right,
even the Global Imams Council.
right.
So all I could say is that at first there was a sense within the Democratic Party that the definition no could never occur. But then actually in the spring of 2024, 133 Democrats in the House joined Republicans to pass the Anti-Semitism Awareness Act. And 133 Democrats is more than, let's vote, like 62% of the Democratic caucus. So to me, this is there is overwhelming support for Jews and with regard to equal civil rights, and also, frankly, for Israel in terms of actual votes taken by the House. I was looking at the House specifically.
And is it fraying over this deportation stuff?
I think so. It could be the case that there's a pendulum, maybe, and it's moved. But I haven't seen votes in Congress related to either Anti-Semitism Awareness Act under Trump yet, or Israel, to give me any indication that there may be an issue with regard to votes. But I can say that the Democratic Party isn't helping itself if it's the case that it's going to side with literally terrorists. So that doesn't make any sense to me. I'm actually, as a registered Democrat, I'm furious with what I'm seeing from the party, because you have to actually, and it's unfortunately the case, it seems, that it's also dovetails with what we're seeing on campus with, the permissiveness that exists under the guise of notion of protest or First Amendment is actually not related to a lot of the facts. And so my worry is the Democrats might continue to lose votes in elections if they actually don't look at the facts. Now, of course, everything should be, I'm for the First Amendment rights, and I'm for due process. But if someone has acted with misconduct of the nature that we're seeing it from what we understand is being alleged, we'll wait for the facts to come out. That we have laws for that.
And
that should be enforced.
Yeah. And so the politics of this you just see as like, it's terrorism. It's like, you don't it's bad politics. You want to counter the Hamas terrorists. Those are the bad guys,
I
and
think that's bipartisan.
It's an overwhelming issue. Like this is not like radioactive. Like the the thing is, Hamas terrorists are bad.
Iran, again, the head of national intelligence under Biden specifically delineated that Harvard is accelerating these disruptions on campus and is supporting them.
I mean, Iran is.
I'm sorry, Iran.
Yeah.
So I'm like, wait a sec. I mean, of course, Iran is behind the attack on Israel, from 6 different physical directions and then 7. In addition to my view, with regard to hybrid warfare and the attacks on Jews outside of Israel.
Yeah.
So I just people are not recognizing the nature of the threats that are under.
Right. Right. And then inside the campuses, you do hear these complaints about free speech and kind of interference and what would you say to somebody who said, that Congress should leave the I guess you already said you just if the reason Congress and Washington had to step in was that the university leaderships were just where they were failing.
With regard to just enforcing their own existing policies,
Yeah,
equally to all
yeah,
property. It makes no sense.
yeah.
It is bizarre. I can tell you, unfortunately, that they're going to be. So I come from a family of educators. My father is a professor. Was a professor emeritus. My uncle is the chairman of the Nobel Foundation. We care about education and we care about humanistic endeavors. But I can tell you that, from what I can tell, just from the NIH, monies that Harvard receives, I think Harvard receives $409 million from NIH, and 300 million of that is direct costs. So based on the new indirect cost rate of 15%, which is going to a reduction, Harvard stands to lose about $60 million a year, each year, from the change in the NIH indirect cost rate. And that's not chump change, because if you think over 4 years, that's $250 million. That it can continue further. So this is real money, and that's separate and apart from what they might also be considering, which now they're doing with Columbia, that I'm not pleased with, is cutting federal funding. That's separate and apart from continuing federal funding but reducing the indirect cost
Well, but
of actually cutting it.
isn't that the force behind Title VI? I mean that's
Yes.
the enforcement mechanism, right?
So
So
so so so
if
they
you
yeah,
that's what that law is all about, right? If
correct.
you don't if you discriminate, you lose your federal funding.
Correct. Well, it's at risk. And so the
Yeah,
question is, how will they come? Will they change even with that risk, which is
yeah,
existential? And I do hope that you have to get the right people in the right seats to actually just manage the entities correctly. It's not complicated stuff. I mean, it is not complicated. Unfortunately, it's the case that the organizations, Harvard Corporation, has delegated not just policy, education policy, to the faculty correctly, but also disciplinary policy. Um, Columbia has a Senate that's it's set up, and it's not, again, it in its own way, since the '60s, that were set up as a result, and they're not effective. I mean, insofar as enforcing their own laws, and that's what's causing all of these problems. And it actually, unfortunately, so those, for example, at Columbia, who took over Barnard just 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago, guess what? A lot of them took over Hamilton Hall the prior year. No consequences,
all right,
because guess what? The DA of Manhattan happened to drop the charges.
all right,
So what do you expect? We're going to
all
have
right,
more such circumstances.
all right.
I don't know. What do you think?
I mean, I'm an optimist, so I'm encouraged by signs that there's some market forces coming to play and some competition and choice.
So about that, yeah.
Um, I see some talent leaving the universities for corporations. I see families making decisions to send and students deciding to go to um, or apply to places, you know, make different choices than they would have made because of these issues. And I
Right.
think that ultimately that will play out. And it's like hard to be patient.
So
But
that's the issue.
these are big institutions. They've been around for hundreds of years. Some of them have endowments that insulate them from the market forces. So I don't know. It's fascinating.
I
It's
still think
fascinating to
there's
see.
still needs a lot more that needs to be done because the underpinnings with regard to the systemic indoctrination are all in place. You still have, again, faculty in place. That is mostly the case. You still have staff in place. You still have some students in place, and you have these centers that are in place. And so that needs to be pulled out.
Right.
Now, in addition, there's a positive thing. You can also bring good professors in.
Yeah.
As to your point. And
Yeah.
for example, Roland Fryer, why shouldn't he be the head of his department? And
Right.
then help with regard to changing the hiring practices and the promotion practices in that department.
Right. Yeah. I mean, anything that I haven't asked about that you want to mention or that you've learned in your work on this that you want to share?
I think we have to be very careful as the Jewish community because there are hatreds and totalitarianism from both sides. Right now, to me, the most explosive version is from the left with Muslim hatred, Muslim Brotherhood, and Iranian activities, and front groups, and Hamas front groups. And we just have to make sure that we're focused on trying to help build a strong, healthy, vibrant American society where we can participate fully. That's my
Yeah, well, that education, the higher education system has been traditionally like really part of the fabric of that. And it's been an
yeah.
engine of upward mobility and opportunity, not just for the Jewish community, although probably especially for the Jewish community, but for, for all immigrant and originally the Puritans, but for
Right.
it, I mean, higher education has been core to American culture, and so I think that's one reason it's so important to improve and make sure the quality and standards are high. Because if it's operating in the other direction, where it ends up, you get people coming in who love America and they end up
Right.
getting taught to hate America,
Right.
or to hate countries like Israel. It's just that's really a dangerous thing, and especially if it's all happening with federal money or donor money.
I'm
So
just trying to repair. We're trying to repair, if we can, restore and make inclusive again, and with high standards of academic rigor and empathy and informed, evidence-based dialogue and debate, and these very valuable institutions that actually develop discoveries that can actually help humanity. So,
yeah. Well, thank you for all the work that you do. Thank you for coming on this editor's live video. And thank everybody here for tuning in. Uh, I hope we're going to be having more of these. Let me know how to make them better. Ira at theeditors.com. We'd love to get a way to get the viewers more involved in asking questions or suggesting guests. Sign up at theeditors.com. And Clarence, thanks a lot. Have a
pleasure.
happy Purim and be well.
You too.
All right. Bye bye.
Take care.